Well, let's bring in a politician who does care about the residents' concerns, and he is a resident himself, Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg. Andrew, welcome to the show.
G'day, Fred. How are you?
Good, good. Now, Senator, you are a resident in this area as well, and I don't want this to be a conversation about a local problem because I see this as emblematic of bigger issues. Now, so firstly, do you agree this is typical of the way politics is done these days? Sometimes, behind closed doors and without opponents being alerted to it?
Well, Fred, the main issue here is that the interests of the small businesses have not been taken into account. I think there's been a lot of discussion in back rooms about what to do here, but I don't believe there's been a proper ventilation of the issues and the impacts on small businesses. And obviously I represent the state in the federal parliament, so I'm not engaged in day-to-day road and transport issues, but I do know that the incumbents are doing a poor job of representing the small businesses, which I believe will be very badly affected if this is to go ahead.
How badly affected will they be?
Well, to start with, it will erect a permanent cycleway in front of all these businesses. And Oxford Street is dominated by small business. There are other roads which have very few or no small businesses. So I think they will be affected in the construction phase, but permanently impacted, perhaps through the loss of parking spaces and accessibility, but also physically having a barrier in front of their businesses will be bad for their shops.
Well, just to explain to the viewers about how serious this could be, at one end of this stretch of Oxford Street is St Vincent's Hospital, and you don't have to wait long on Oxford Street to see an ambulance rush down there with sirens blaring. If they reduce the street from 4 lanes to 2, those ambulances are going to get stuck in traffic, no doubt about it. Now, that seems to me reflective of the fact that the people behind this don't really care.
Well, I don't think this has had the proper consideration that it requires. I believe there have been a lot of conversations that have happened behind the scenes here, and what I'd like to see is a full ventilation of the best options with the data before any decisions are made. Now, ultimately, all roads, pardon the pun, lead to Jo Haylen, who is the new roads minister, and she'll be forced to make a decision. But I would like to see all members of federal and state parliament who have a view on this present their perspectives to Minister Haylen, as well as the local councillors. I mean, they play a very important role here in representing the local interests of small businesses, but also the residents.
Yeah, well, representing is the key word here. I mean, and again, just to sort of make it emblematic of what's happening around the country, it's increasingly the feeling of people that they're just no longer represented by their representatives. Now, but talking about stuff that's going on behind the scenes, now you don't have to stand very long on the bike paths that do exist in this neighbourhood to notice that more than half of the people riding along those bike paths work for courier and delivery companies. Now, what are the odds that there's a bit of lobbying going on from those companies in the background?
Well, I'm not against the express delivery of tucker to people's houses, but I think it's a balancing act here, and if there are going to be bike paths, they need to be in a place which is not going to be massively disruptive to businesses and to existing roads. And I'm yet to see the case for Oxford Street be made that that's where the bike path should be. So I think ultimately there's been a state election in the state of New South Wales. There's a new roads minister, and I think it's now incumbent upon Ms Haylen to run a clear and transparent process here before any decisions are made.
Yeah, fair enough. And just one more question before we move on to a few other topics. Am I right? Are bike lanes a Trojan horse for 15-minute cities? And if so, are 15-minute cities bad?
Oh, look, I don't know whether it's a Trojan horse for 15-minute cities. and I don't have a particularly strong view about this. I think some people will be happy to live within 15 minutes of everything they want to do, and others that prefer to travel more broadly. I'm not into setting parameters for people to live their lives.